Fort Warren on George's Island, Boston Harbor. George's Island is located in Boston Harbor, and it is where Fort Warren is located. This island sustained agricultural use for 200 years until around 1825, when the U.S. government acquired the island for coastal defense. George's Island had to guard the main shipping channel in Boston. The granite fort started being constructed into its pentagonal shape around 1833. The fort was intimidating to enemies because of its strength and readiness to defend enemy assault. The fort was named for Dr. Joseph Warren, a major general of the Massachusetts militia who sent Paul Revere and William Dawes to alert Lexington and Concord on the night before the Revolution. He died at the Battle of Bunker Hill. It was important for the Union to protect Boston Harbor from enemy ships during the Revolutionary War because New England wouldn't be able to get the supplies they needed. The Union didn't want more blockades, so they began making the fort. A shot was never fired by anyone in the fort, but it served as a useful purpose during the Civil War. In 1858, the fort was used as a training camp for Union soldiers. When training soldiers, the parade ground was used because it provided enough space for infantry training, marching exercises, and inspections. By 1862, Fort Warren was used as a Civil War prison for Confederate soldiers, sailors, and political leaders. With the arrival of 155 political prisoners and over 600 military prisoners, Fort Warren's most important wartime use was for imprisonment. Most prisoners were kept in rooms called casemates, which were located in long walls called fronts. In the third front, the casemates were used by the fort's officers and by imprisoned Confederate officers from 1860s to the 1890s. The rooms typically had a kitchen, bedroom, and parlor. By 1900, the casemates in the third front were used for administration. One of the most famous civilian prisoners at Fort Warren was Alexander H. Stephens, who was Vice President of the Confederacy. Stephens was confined in the prison for 5 months, from May to October in 1865. While imprisoned, he wrote a detailed diary. On May 28, 1865, he describes the initial impact of his imprisonment and says, "The horrors of imprisonment, close confinement, no one to seek or talk to, with the reflection of being cut off for I know not how long and perhaps forever, from communication with dear ones at home, are beyond description. Words utterly fail to express the soul's anguish." Fort Warren has a reputation of treating its prisoners better, and its living conditions were much better than those of other prisoner of war camps. Only 13 prisoners died of disease out of the thousands of prisoners held there, and it was considered a relatively humane facility for Confederate prisoners. A memorial was built on the island for 13 prisoners who unfortunately died during this time period. One of the legends of George's Island and the fort is the legend of the Lady in Black. Out of the thousands of prisoners captured, one young lieutenant had recently been married. He sent a message to his wife telling her where he was located. His wife came up with a plan to try and save her husband and help him escape. Somehow she managed to send him a message, and then she rowed across the water to the island, dressed in men's clothing. She then reached a ditch under the corridor of dungeons where she gave him a signal and was hoisted up to meet her husband. They then planned for the future and decided to dig their way out of the dungeon to the parade ground, but they are caught by some soldiers on duty. The wife attempts to fire a gun at the commanding officer, Colonel Dimmick, but fails when the gun explodes and kills her husband. Colonel Dimmick had her hanged for being a spy, and her last request was to be hung in women's clothing. At various times through the years, the ghost of the Lady in Black has returned to haunt the soldiers at the fort. After 100 years of defense and military use, in 1947 the fort was decommissioned and acquired by the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation for historic preservation. It is known to have more memories of the Civil War than any other place in New England.